At this time, I have the honor to present to you the moral leader of our nation. I have the pleasure to present to you Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
We all know what happens next. Martin Luther King gives the I Have a Dream speech, racial equality is achieved, and we all did overcome. At least that's what they told us in elementary school. For my generation, the civil rights movement is already in the rearview mirror and fading. So the 50th anniversary of the march makes me want to look deeper, to try to connect it to today, to my own life. On 130th Street and Lenox Avenue in Harlem, a few blocks from my home, the march began inside an abandoned row home turned office where two labor leaders, Bayard Rustin and A. Philip Randolph, headed the planning and administration of what would become the most important social demonstration of the 20th century. But did it succeed? Have the demands of the marchers for access to jobs, for voting rights, for an end to segregation, 50 years later, have those demands been met? The primary goal of the '63 march was jobs. It's embedded in the very title. So what's the status of jobs today, and how does it compare to '63? I visit the Economic Policy Institute in Washington, D.C. Algernon Alston heads the program on race, ethnicity, and the economy. What is the state of African American employment today?
The condition for African Americans in terms of jobs is never good. We have about 50 years of data we can go back, and we can see that the black unemployment rate is always between 2 and 2.5 times the white unemployment rates. You know, I joke sometimes that blacks should stop asking for equality with whites, that they should say, we just want the highest unemployment rates that whites have seen in the last 50 years. Just give us your worst. That would actually be an improvement.
Remember the recession, when national unemployment rates were ticking into the double digits? That's where black unemployment sits on a normal day. Yep, black unemployment on a normal day is nearly twice the average national rate of recession unemployment. When the U.S. economy hits a rough patch, levels of black unemployment can balloon to 15% or more. And that's been the case for 50 years.
I don't think people fully get it, how deep the jobs crisis is for African Americans.
Rustin and Randolph recognized the importance of jobs to the movement and to the march. The March on Washington was preceded in June of '63 by a massive march in Detroit, Michigan, where King is said to have first delivered the I Have a Dream speech in Cobo Hall. Supported by labor leaders like the UAW's Walter Reuther, access to jobs was key to that march, and 50 years later, at the commemorative Freedom Walk in Detroit, a city now in bankruptcy, it's still an issue. On the front lines of the fight for jobs, aside from Al Sharpton, there's also Focus Hope, a Detroit nonprofit born out of the civil rights era and dedicated to addressing job training and education.
Access to jobs was being denied to African Americans, to women, to other minorities here in this city as late as the 80s. And Focus Hope has been fighting against that.
In one of Focus Hope's IT training classes, I find Barbara Perry, 65, and looking for work.
I never had a hard time getting a job. I was always working somewhere, working and going to school somewhere. At this point in my life, this is the first time I've been unemployed, and I'm finding that in this period of my life, I can't hardly take care of myself. Excuse me, I'm not going to cry.
It's okay, it's all right.
Barbara worked in the car industry before it eroded, then in skilled trade manufacturing before her job of 25 years was shipped to China. She wanted to take me to the site of a few of the places she worked, though they hardly exist anymore.
What does it mean to have this kind of place in a community?
It creates a way of life. You know, you work, you make the money, you live your life. like a foundation, you take it away, you know, everything else crumbles.
Barbara's story is not terribly unique. In a changing economy, people lose jobs. But when one considers the trifecta of disparities in joblessness, wealth, and income for African Americans, the effect of unemployment can be particularly devastating.
So we see that even for the black middle class, when they're hit by some economic crisis, they fall down. They're more likely to fall back into poverty.
I was grossing between 70 and 90,000 a year. You know? Now I got to the place of having to choose between a loaf of bread and toilet paper. Toilet paper won. You know what I'm saying?
I think that there's been a true failure to properly educate people and to prepare them for jobs in an ever-shifting economy. So we can repair a lot of the educational shortcomings and also then help those folks get jobs.
Perhaps this is why the March on Washington organizers called for a monumental federal jobs program as part of their core demands. That program never happened.
If you have the federal government saying our number one priority is making sure that everyone who wants a job can get a job, then this problem of high unemployment in black communities and high poverty in black communities will go away.
A federal jobs program whose main sort of interest is to benefit all people, but certainly it would benefit African Americans, seems like a tough political thing to get through.
Absolutely.
Is that even possible?
Absolutely. The question is, what's the alternative? We've done an experiment in the last 50 years. We said, we're not going to have the federal government do it. Let's see what the private sector can do. And the private sector hasn't done anything.
Equal opportunity employer programs, legislation for anti-discrimination in the workplace are legacies of the march. There is progress. But did the march ultimately succeed in securing access to jobs for all those who wanted to work? The answer is in the numbers. Join us for the next episode where we explore voting rights. You can also click one of these buttons up here and find more episodes, subscribe, or find more information at pbs.org/marchonwashington.